Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back again to another 2022 version of our NRL live streaming sessions. Today's show is another in a series of live streaming sessions on a variety of topics. And every other week on Wednesdays at the same time, we will discuss a new topic. And we want to encourage you to provide as much input as possible by calling or texting us with your questions or comments. And the number to call, as you can see on the screen, is 1-844-424-0500. You can call or text us with those comments or questions. And as a bit of background, we're doing these radio shows and streaming sessions like this one to help community members and the general public better understand what is involved in the federal impact assessment and provincial environmental assessment processes. These are complex processes, and we want to try and help explain these to community members and others. And we also want to encourage viewers and listeners to participate in both of these processes. And so we've been working hard to prepare communication and do events like this to break things down a bit, so to speak, and make things easier to follow and hopefully get you interested and participating in the process. So with me today is a familiar face and voice, Mr. Qasim Sadiq. Hello, Qasim.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Good, thanks. And just for our viewers and listeners, just to remind them, Qasim is the project co-lead for the Northern Road Link project. He will be joining me through this series, and we'll talk about the different topics. And we basically do it in more of a conversational kind of format, and we usually have a PowerPoint presentation that we talk to as well as we move through this. And so let's get things started. In today's session, which is called Draft EA Terms of Reference, Where We Are and What Comes Next, we are going to talk about the Draft Environmental Assessment Terms of Reference review period and the Terms of Reference process moving forward. So let's get moving on this because our time is limited. Qasim, maybe you can run through some of the topics we're going to cover today.
Yeah, absolutely, Don. So today, we're talking about the draft terms of reference, and there are five things specifically that we want to talk about. So the first one is, where are we in the provincial TOR process? So we talk about that from a process perspective. If you think about something that has a couple of steps, we'll talk about which step are we in. The second thing we're going to talk about is the draft terms of reference review period, sort of explaining the revised due date for comments, how this is a voluntary process, and the importance of participating. The third thing is capacity funding opportunities for select Indigenous communities. Number four, what comes next in the TOR going forward? What do we do after this step? And then number five, and lastly, how to contact us and the different ways in which you can get in touch.
Thank you, Qasim. And hopefully after this, our viewers will have a pretty good idea of the process as we move forward. And again, we're trying to encourage your input to the draft tour. And so maybe we can get things started in terms of some background in terms of where we are. And if we can have the team, oh, there we are, the technical team. Look at they're ahead of me here. We're on we're on slide 3 here, and so just to give a bit of a background for our viewers, um, the TOR was the notice of commencement of the TOR, so the official public notice was issued in May of 2021. I'm a year behind, and the prepared draft terms of reference was then submitted to MECP, and now we're in the process of having it reviewed by Indigenous communities and the general public as a whole. And so in that occurred in late November. So the notice of draft terms of reference for review went out, I believe, late November, November 28th, I think it was. And as Qasim will get into a little bit later on, that process was to extend to January 8th, but now there's been an adjustment made to that. And so once that, so that has occurred, and then we receive comments through this process. We're receiving them on an ongoing basis until the deadline, and we're responding to those comments and incorporating the feedback that we get from communities, and making any necessary amendments to the TOR. And then once those adjustments are made, it becomes a document called a proposed TOR, which then goes through like an official mandated review period once it's submitted to MECP, and we're expecting that proposed TOR to be submitted probably by in the spring sometime, early to mid-spring, I would say. Qasim, would you say so?
Yeah, Don, we're sort of looking at early spring at this point. So somewhere between late winter, early to mid spring, we're still sort of in the process of receiving comments at this point. So as they come in, we're creating responses. So that takes a little bit of time. So we don't have an exact date at this point, but as a marker, let's say early in the spring.
Oh, thank you for that. And then once that occurs, and any final adjustments are made to the proposed TOR, it is then submitted back to MECP and for a minister's decision. And then there are three paths that we'll talk about a little bit later on that follow that potential paths that are followed from the minister's decision. So maybe now, Qasim, you can talk about some recent news, which is the revised due date for the draft TOR review.
Yeah, Don, that's a really important point for us today. You know, we're sort of focusing in on the draft terms of reference process. So the most important thing from today's conversation for everyone that's tuned in is to know that, if you have an interest in having a look at the draft terms of reference, it is still available. We released it originally in late November, intended for a 30-day period for people to look at it, an early sort of voluntary step on our part to enable people, either Indigenous communities, leadership, community members, advisors, consultants, or a general public member of the public interested in the project. We released that late in November for people to have a chance to look at it and really have the time to sort of digest it. And if they've got early comments, to provide those to us. So because of the holidays, we added a cushion period for the holidays, which brought us to the 8th of January. Now, during the holidays, of course, the situation with the pandemic changed a little bit, and we're in a new wave at this point. So we knew that, people are used to working remotely. A number of our Indigenous communities around the project have been working remotely after the first wave. A couple of offices had opened up, and then a couple of cases also came up. So, recognizing that leadership was probably focused on trying to pivot back to remote means, to making adjustments for the new wave, we decided that it made sense to push the deadline out to the end of the month. So right now you've got up till the 31st of January to provide comments on the draft TOR. Again, this is a voluntary voluntary process, what that means is this is not the only opportunity to provide a comment on the tour. It's an optional one, but there will be an other opportunity to provide those comments later in spring when we officially submit the proposed terms of reference. So the key takeaway really is that it's the 19th of January right now. If you have an interest in reviewing and providing comments to the project, you're able to do that till the 31st of January.
No, it's. Thank you for that, Qasim, and we've already received a number of comments, haven't we already?
Yeah, no, I'm really delighted to say that at this point we've received hundreds of comments, from indigenous communities, our neighboring indigenous communities, from members of the public, from government ministries and agencies. So we're very glad to see the level of participation. And many people, they saw that they knew that the project we'd been sort of doing these over last spring and summer. Dawn, you, I, and Michael were doing these online sessions, live streams, radio programs, and sort of getting in touch with communities on a regular basis. So people anticipated, they knew we were going to do this. So many were prepared, and we're very thankful for everyone who's taking the time at this stage to provide comments. And those who require a little bit of more time, we really look forward to getting comments by the 31st. And then those who have an intention to provide comments but aren't able to provide them by the 31st, there is an additional opportunity over the next few weeks, really in the next few months, to provide input on the tour as it becomes available through the formal process.
And Qasim, the comments we've received to date are they've been so impressive, right? They're very thoughtful, um, great comments that are very constructive and really are useful, for us to shape this draft tour, aren't they?
They really are. This is why it made sense to us at the project team level to sort of share comments, to provide this opportunity to communities to look at this document in its early iteration. There's so many studies that are going to be conducted as part of this environmental assessment and potentially an impact assessment as well. But when communities, indigenous neighbors, when members of the public look at that draft, they certainly bring a slightly different perspective and angle which we might not have thought of. And many of those comments are so thoughtful. So we have nothing but gratitude for everyone who took the time to provide that. I think ultimately the project will become a better project as a result of everyone's participation.
So true, so true. And technical team, if we can move to slide number 5, I will talk a bit about how this draft tour review period is a voluntary opportunity for communities to review the document in detail and to work with us and engage with us as the project team and get that feedback and use that feedback, respond to that feedback, and understand where community members are coming from in terms of their thinking and using that to make sure that this draft tour document is one that we can be proud of, that is comprehensive, and that will effectively evaluate the project. And this isn't just the only time. We're going to continue to provide other enhanced opportunities for Indigenous communities to engage and consult on the project. Our door is always open. Basically, we would be delighted to meet with you in whichever way is most appropriate for you and most convenient for you. We've done meetings in the evenings, in all kinds of different formats, and we're happy to share this information and listen to you. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to listen to you, take that information, process it, and hopefully reflect your comments in the draft tour. And I should point out that there's, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, there is a formal and regulated review period. So an actual, the draft tour review period is a voluntary opportunity, but there's a formal and regulated review period that would occur, as Qasim said, probably early to mid-spring 2022, the way things are shaping up, which would be the period after which the proposed tour is submitted to the MECP. So there are so many opportunities to engage with us, and we really want to make sure that you as community members, I mean, I have to say that, in my visits to communities, and we haven't been able to visit them, unfortunately, as frequently as we would have liked because of COVID, as you know, Qasim, but I have observed a lot of, we've heard a lot of very good questions from community members. And I think those questions, the fact that they've been following along with and taking in a lot of the information that we've been communicating to them, whether it's through newsletters, whether it's through the streaming sessions and radio shows and other vehicles. And as a result, we're getting these really good questions and these thoughtful and constructive comments. So it's been such a positive process. So um, these tour review periods are important components of the EA process. By the way, I should also mention, and the number's on your screen, 1-844-424-0500. Please call or text us with your questions or comments. And Qasim, maybe you can talk a bit about the importance of communities and the general public providing input on these terms of reference, which is slide 6 for our technical team.
Yeah, Don, it's that's such an important thing for us in the project. We really highly encourage indigenous communities, their associated tribal councils, advisors to review and provide comments on the draft tour. That is going to be one of the most invaluable things for the project, to refine it, to ensure that we minimize potential impact of the project on neighboring communities. We avoid really valuable sacred resources that the communities have. So that becomes only possible if we get participation from neighboring communities, if they provide comments on the draft tour, and then on the proposed tour. So even if you're not able to provide comments at this stage, it is still such a great opportunity to just look at the document, review it, digest it, think of comments that you want to provide in a couple of weeks or months as we move towards the proposed tour. And comments we receive today, some of them might be clarification questions, but others might be points raised by community members or agencies or ministries to make a certain change in the tour. And we can reflect that at this point. So once we're done doing that, just to recognize that we've undertaken that process and edited it, the new document that we create, the edited tour, the label changes to a proposed tour. And that's the version that's submitted to the regulator in the province of Ontario, which is the Ministry of Environment in this case. And once it goes to the regulator, the official comment period begins, which lasts for a number of weeks. So we'll speak to that later in the next few series. But for now, I think the key takeaway really is that it's really important to participate. Whatever thoughts you have about the project, if you relay them to us, we can have an open communication. We're doing these live streams, these radio shows, but it is so easy to reach us, Don. And I think thanks to technology, it's never been easier. I know internet wasn't the greatest in the remote north, but with Starlink, it's been remarkable that we've been having regular conversations with a number of remote communities recently. So we're only a Zoom call, a Teams call, or a good old-fashioned phone call away whenever there's interest in a community. And as soon as this lockdown ends and hopefully this wave crushes, which is something we're all hoping for, we're able to travel again. And we would be delighted to meet with communities either in the community or in Thunder Bay or another place.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, Qasim. You're right. We're ready to respond to any request for any form of engagement that you would like. So again, we encourage that input. So many of our listeners and our viewers may be wondering what happens after they provide the comments. And maybe now let's talk a bit to slide number 7. And when these comments come in, we are required, and well, we are required to respond to each one of these comments. So this is quite an involved process where we look at each question and we go through an in-depth or a review of what is being asked and what is being suggested, and we prepare a response to that comment. And then so we create large tables. We call them, I think, concordance tables, where we're responding to the comments that come in on the TOR. And it's quite a lengthy process, and it involves a number of different people reviewing the comments. And because, as we will talk about, an environmental assessment is a complex process or project, and involving a lot of different experts. So these comments, as they come in, are reviewed quite often by a number of people, and then the responses are prepared. And as Qasim talked about, sometimes it involves just preparing a response, maybe clarifying something or pointing to some area in the document that maybe addresses the concern specifically, or it could involve making changes to the draft TOR where they're deemed necessary, and that happens quite often. Adjustments are made like that, and the purpose of the process, as you can imagine based on our explanation, is to hear from the people that could be affected from the project and make sure that this work plan, this environmental assessment terms of reference is comprehensive and will answer the questions that need to be answered in terms of potential impact of the project, um, on the environment. And when I say environment, that just doesn't mean natural environment, as we know. So next up, we're going to discuss the help that's available. And this is an important topic to cover, I think. And we want to discuss the help that's available to Indigenous communities to complete their reviews, whether it's the draft TOR or it's the proposed TOR. And as Qasim will talk about, this, what we call capacity funding, will also help in other areas too. So maybe Qasim, you can take us through that on slide number 8.
Yeah, absolutely, Don. So, just this is the proponent of the project are the communities of Martin Falls and Webakwe. So, as an Indigenous project led by 2 First Nations, we recognize that this is a huge priority for the 2 communities. It's entirely in their traditional territories, and it's very important to them. But for other neighboring communities, they might have slightly different priorities and interests, and we recognize that. Uh, Given the scarcity of resources, generally speaking, available to communities in remote northern Ontario, there's often a need for resources for activities such as a TOR review, hiring an external advisor or resource or technical position to be able to provide comments requires funding. And the province has recognized that and made capacity funding available to selected Indigenous communities, primarily through the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines, Natural Resources, and Forestry. The funding is significant. It does enable significant participation to provide comments on the TOR, on the next steps in the process. You can hire external advisors. You can have a community level position through which You can bring community members together remotely right now and in person in the future, if public health measures allow for that. Have things like communication equipment. Starlinks is one thing I mentioned. So these are things that can be supported with this funding. There is also additional funding available through the project for the collection of Indigenous knowledge, which is such an important thing for us as an Indigenous proponent. The direction for me and for Michael from Martin Falls in Webakwe is to really ensure that, key decisions are made with Indigenous knowledge at the forefront. And I think we've already done that, Don, in many ways in the project, even at the early stage, sitting with Martin Falls and with Webakwe. And, we drew a
That's right.
couple of lines based on engineering and science and past studies. But then we sat with the two communities. This is essentially their traditional territory, so it made sense to start there as they're the proponents. And we looked at all of those areas. And even in the early days, we were told that we had to avoid certain places. So, areas which were promising from an engineering perspective were no longer feasible from an Indigenous knowledge perspective. So the decision was simple for us, that we don't go there. And we chose alternative routes. So if you read the terms of reference document, you will see that we explain that a little bit in the document as well. And that really is the type of decisions we're hoping for through Indigenous knowledge from neighboring communities as well. So for that, we provide additional funding directly through the project.
You're so right, Qasim. I mean, we sit down with community members, with a proposed route, and the level of knowledge that they bring to the table. And I mean, this is their homeland. They have spent literally hundreds, if not thousands, of years on these areas, and just the level of insight that they provide and the value that they add to the process is incredible. And you know we totally acknowledge that the terms of reference document is a technical document. It's quite technical, and it's not easy for a layperson to just pick up and read through and completely understand. So, and we know that communities are challenged for resources, and that's where these the capacity funding opportunities really fit in. So we really encourage you to contact us, and we can then connect you, as Qasim said, to the ministry and the individuals that can help with hopefully getting some capacity funding. So before we finish off, I just wanted to talk briefly about what comes next, and we'll be receiving comments on the draft tour, as we mentioned earlier, until the end of July. So there's 12 more days remaining. And those comments will be reviewed and responded to, with the draft tour being adjusted, as I mentioned, as necessary. And that will then become the proposed tour. And then that will be finalized, as we talked about, hopefully early spring, late winter of 2022 this year, and then submitted to MECP. And then they will make that available through a formal mandated process for review and comment, and then we will address those comments further, and then resubmit the proposed tour, and then it will go back to the MECP for the minister's decision. And then there's three options for in terms of the tour. It will either be accepted, or accepted with changes or amendments, or rejected. And so there's three possible routes that proposed tour will follow. So that's what's coming up next. And maybe I'll just ask you, Qasim, any further thoughts or comments that you'd like to add before we go?
Yeah, Don, just one last sort of concluding summary comment, really, which is the draft tour is still open for comments. It is the 19th today, so you've got about the next 12 days or so till the 31st to really provide some initial preliminary comments if you would like. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please go to our website, download it, have a read, think about it. And it would enable you to be ready to provide comments once the official period starts as well. And we very much look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Qasim, and good to have you back in the co-host chair. And that wraps up today's discussion. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks when we talk about key themes of the comments and questions that we're encouraging you to provide us with, that we've received so far regarding the project. So as Qasim touched on, don't forget to visit our website at northernroadlink.ca or follow us on social media at our handle is NRL Roadlink. And we want to hear from you. Don't be shy. Our door is always open, as I mentioned earlier. There's lots of ways to contact us. Tell us what you need. Give us your comments, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Thanks again, Qasim, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Don. Absolutely. Take care.